Good Old Games recently added the classic Resident Evil trilogy to its catalog, and apparently it took work to convince Capcom because their response was basically, why would anyone want to play the originals when the remakes exist? Which, yeah, really shows you that game preservation doesn't rank very high on their priority list. And that's a shame, because games aren't made in a vacuum. They have inspirations and predecessors, and we have to pay older games their due. So today, fresh off of Ninja Gaiden putting me in the mood for pain and action games, we're talking about the first two entries in the series that basically invented the modern 3D beat 'em up, Devil May Cry. And actually, starting with Resident Evil wasn't accidental. Devil May Cry and RE are like weirdly intertwined. DMC1 literally began life as a prototype for Resident Evil 4, directed by the legendary Hideki Kamiya, who also helmed Resident Evil 2. Capcom thought the prototype was too action-heavy for Resident Evil, which is funny considering all the boulder punching that was about to come. But they still liked the prototype, and so they told Kamiya to turn it into its own IP. Inspired by classics such as Devilman and Space Adventure Cobra, Team Little Devils created one of the most venerated action franchises of all time. So, what's the story? Demons in Hell exist. The king of Hell is this big, evil guy called Mundus who wants to conquer Earth for no real reason other than, I don't know, it might be fun. Halfway through his invasion, his right-hand man, Sparda, has a moral realization and goes, maybe exterminating an entire plane of existence is bad? He then betrays Hell, seals the demon world, protects humanity for centuries, and falls in love with a human woman named Eva. They have two sons together, Dante and Virgil. What a guy. Unfortunately, since Sparda gave up most of his power becoming more human, demons eventually killed him and Eva. Years later, Dante is now a full-grown demon hunter running his own shop, Devil May Cry. One day, a mysterious woman named Trish crashes through his door, tells him Mundus is returning and that he needs to head somewhere called Malay Island to keep Mundus on his side of the border. Also, Trish looks exactly like Dante's mom. I'm sure that won't be relevant to the plot. DMC1's story really isn't very complex. You get most of it in the opening and ending. Everything in between can be summed up as Dante explores Spooky Island and kicks demon ass. But that's fine. Kamiya games aren't about intricate plots. They're about combat depth, arcade design, and style. So let's talk about style. Is DMC1 the best looking game ever? No, it's not, but it oozes style. Character designs are instantly memorable, and Malay Island, while not the greatest setting, still gives you iconic areas like floating ocean platforms, gothic hallways, a random pirate ship because why not? It's also cool how interconnected a lot of the world feels. Areas sort of loop back around to each other like they do in the previously mentioned Ninja Gaiden. And maybe this is a hot take, but I think DMC1 has the best atmosphere in the entire series. Since it started as a Resident Evil prototype, the game leans more into gothic horror than later entries. Instead of blasting rock 24/7, it often uses ambient tracks while you wander shadowy corridors. It's like RE met Castlevania and had a melodramatic, leather-wearing baby. But alright, that's enough foreplay. Let's talk about the gameplay. You get melee weapons and guns. Melee does the heavy lifting, guns extend combos and control space. Technically, you have access to as many as 5 melee weapons, but 4 of them are virtually identical in terms of movesets. Your main 2 devil arms are going to be Alastor, which is the lightning sword, fast and combo friendly, and Ifrit, the fire gauntlets, slow but very strong. They're both tons of fun, and the game encourages switching because there's a basic elemental weakness system. Basically, if you see a fire enemy, hit them with Alastor. Lightning enemy, hit them with Ifrit. It's not rocket science, it's not even bottle rocket science, but it adds strategy. Guns are also pretty fun. Ebony and Ivory are mainly used to juggle and keep combos going. The shotgun is the workhorse. Up close it says back off buddy in 12 gauge. The grenade launcher is great for bigger enemies and bosses, especially if you master the grenade roll. And the Nightmare Beta is a fine weapon, I guess. It fires shots that ricochet around. It's cool, but it's probably not worth your Devil Trigger. Speaking of which, Devil Trigger, one of the most influential mechanics in action gaming. Activate DT and Dante becomes faster, stronger, more durable, and glows like a Christmas ornament made of pure anime. I love that you need Alistor or Ifrit equipped to access DT. It kind of feels like Dante is, channeling their power through his own demonic heritage. But DT isn't infinite. You get runes under your health bar showing you how long it lasts, and you expand them with purple orbs, which brings us to the shop lets you buy new moves, health upgrades, DT extensions, and etc. How do you earn currency? Simple. Be stylish, baby. Your performance is ranked from D to S during fights and at the end of each mission. Higher ranks mean more red orbs, which are this game's money. If you're consistently getting S ranks, the game basically says, nice job, big shot, here, have some new toys. Whereas if you're struggling to even get a C, the game gently suggests, maybe master what you have now before you embarrass yourself further. But don't worry, DMC1 isn't crazy hard or anything. On normal. Your upgrades carry on to New Game Plus, which is good because unless you really like farming red orbs, you're not gonna buy everything in one run. My advice to beginners, prioritize new moves and Devil Trigger before health. That's because you can find health upgrades by exploring or doing secret missions. But be warned, many of them are missable. Skip one and you're gonna have to wait for the next playthrough on a higher difficulty. Oops. DMC1's difficulty modes aren't as wild as something like Ninja Gaiden, but they're still solid. Encounters get remixed, and enemies on Hard Plus even get new attacks. And then there's Dante Must Die mode, the series' trademark highest difficulty, where enemies can use Devil Trigger. Unlike later games, you actually get a visible timer showing you when they'll activate it. If that timer hits 0, yeah, good luck, write a will, but it's a very fun challenge, especially because of another thing DMC1 does better than any other entry in my opinion, the enemy design. I mentioned that Kamiya is inspired by arcade games. He wanted players to get that same feeling he got when he was a kid. It wasn't enough to just get through the game, you also had to master it, learn all the secret optimal strategies. Nowhere in DMC1 is that clearer than with the enemy design. Most enemies have a critical weakness, an instant kill strategy that's incredibly hard to pull off, but extremely rewarding. Every enemy type has a unique audio cue telegraphing attacks. It reinforces the idea that Dante is a hunter, studying the behavior of these demons before striking. The ones I want to highlight are the shadows. These are the panther demons that melt into puddles. They have tons of attacks, each with a unique audio callout. They're immune to melee in panther form, so you have to shoot them to make them vulnerable, then hit their core. But then they enter a desperation mode where they can perform a grab that takes like 75% of your health, no joke. And only after you've endured that for a few seconds do they finally die. And yes, there's a quick kill method for them, but I'm not telling you, earn it. Enemy design is super relevant in action games, and DMC1 aces it. There are bosses in some games that aren't as complex as the Shadow is here. And on the subject of bosses, there's only 5 of them, many fought multiple times, but most of them are pretty memorable. Here's my ranking, from worst to best. Number 5, Griffin. The first 2 fights are okay, but the third one is terrible. The camera just gives up and cries on the floor whenever he flies. Number 4, Phantom. Good fights, but not as deep as later bosses. The devs must have liked him since he gets brought back in 2, some 1 and 3, and also in a game we're gonna talk about some other day. Number 3, Mundus. The first phase comes out of left field the first time, but once you get good at it, it's a fun fight, appropriately epic. Number 2, Nightmare. Some people hate him, I don't. Every attack has a counter, his core system is clever, and he forces you to think. And number 1, Nello Angelo. Incredibly tough, especially on higher difficulties. Every victory feels earned. Strategies differ depending on whether you're using Alastor or Ifrit, and the story twist of his identity adds emotional weight. Now, okay, I mentioned the things DMC1 does better, here's what it does worse. 2 main flaws. Number 1, weapon variety. Like I said before, you really only get 2 devil arms. Fun ones, yes, but just 2. Compared to the 4 or 5 unique weapons that later games give you, having basically just Ifrit and a bunch of swords with similar movesets is disappointing. The series' signature weapon switching is also pretty clunky here. You either have to go through menus or press the right analog stick. In both cases, you need to be perfectly still, so no weapon switching mid-combo. I'm not, fundamentally against weapon switching having to be done through menus, just look at my Ninja Gaiden review, but here it only compounds the issue of lack of weapon variety. The second major complaint is that you can't replay individual missions. If you miss something, you either need to reload an old save or start a whole new playthrough. It doesn't feel intentional, like the devs are challenging you to find everything, it just feels like an oversight. And then there's, more minor stuff, like the underwater segments being pretty lame and the platforming being downright bad, but neither of these are major flaws, since it's not what the game focuses on, but they are worth mentioning. So yeah, DMC1 isn't perfect, but it's a damn strong first entry. DMC2 though, yeah, let's talk about that. The first game was a surprise hit, so Capcom greenlit a sequel pretty much right away, except Kamiya was unavailable, so they hired another director. Who? I don't know. They never made his identity public. Yeah, even more than 20 years after the game came out, and we still don't know who the first director was. That should raise some red flags. People have all sorts of theories as to who this mysterious director was, but personally, I say the most likely explanation is it was a relative newcomer, somebody who showed promise before, but didn't really know how to handle a game like this. I say this because the development team behind 2 was mostly focused on arcade games like Power Stone and Capcom vs SNK. This was their first project for consoles. Reading up on this game's development history just makes it clear that whoever this director was, he wasn't exactly having the time of his life directing 2. Bingo Morihashi, for instance, is a writer who would later work on DMC3. He was brought along to work on this game's script, but by the time they hired him, the game was so far into production that he was told to not make any major changes. So why hire him? And also, this is sad because I can tell you right now that DMC2 needed major changes. The development was such a disaster that Capcom eventually removed this mystery man and brought in Hideaki Itsuno of Rival Schools fame to salvage the game with just a few months left. I assume Itsuno's first day on the job went something like this.
I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein, and I want to know what the fuck you're doing with my time!
With all of that in mind, the fact DMC2 even boots up is a miracle. Now, let me be fair. There are things to like about Devil May Cry 2. Here's a short list. 1. The character designs. Dante's cowboy/vampire hunter D aesthetic is pretty cool. 2. Lucia. She's hot. Bring her back, you cowards, and don't you dare cover her up. Number 3, Devil Trigger has customization and the Majin form. Great ideas, wish they'd bring them back. 4, the final boss is pretty decent, but mainly because the rest are awful. And 5, some concepts like rebellion, twosome time, etc. become staples later. Now here's what I don't like. The combat is unbearably slow and floaty, the stinger is the worst in the series, you gain 0 new moves, what you do at the start of the game is what you do at the end, weapon variety is somehow even worse than DMC1, it's just different swords with identical movesets, levels are endless strings of empty rooms and hallways, every mission feels like it lasts for an hour, bosses are terrible, high infested chopper, the game is too damn easy, apparently on purpose because some players said DMC1 was too hard. Bunch of babies. The story goes nowhere and I defy you to tell me what happens without looking it up. And also, Capcom intentionally made Dante less fun because a producer hated the original version. Incredible. DMC2 might be the worst thing to ever carry the Devil May Cry name. Think about that for a second. The edgy reboot, the mobile games, the Netflix adaptation, none of them are as bad as DMC2 because this game commits the cardinal sin. It's boring. So boring that I've never even beaten the higher difficulties. I've never finished Lucia's story. I just beat Dante's campaign once and never looked back. That said, I have seen some impressive mods people have made, such as DMC2 Special Edition. Do they turn DMC2 into a good game? I'm willing to bet not, but it is something. In closing, if you asked me to choose between S-ranking Devil May Cry 2 or rewatching the Netflix show, okay, I would choose S-ranking 2, but it would still be a tough choice. And yet, DMC2 still has value. Itsuno was so frustrated with having to fix somebody else's mess that he begged Capcom to let him direct a real Devil May Cry game from scratch. The result of that was Devil May Cry 3, arguably the best game in the series, but that review is going to have to wait for another day. In any case, this is why game preservation matters. Even bad games can teach valuable lessons, even if it's, what not to do. Devil May Cry 2 is probably the worst major game release of 2003, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to create one of the best action games ever made. Some people might look at the first Devil May Cry game as basically just a glorified prototype for the later entries, but it's so much more than that. It's a terrific game in its own right and even does some things better than all its sequels. It comes highly recommended for fans of action games. DMC2 though, best to just look at it from afar. Yeah, don't get too close. Anyway, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. Because next week, we're gonna talk about everybody's newest favorite game, Dispatch. Not a full review because my PC is a potato and can't run it, but about how the game ties into the superhero genre as a whole and the superhero fatigue debate. Is it real? Is it fake? We're gonna talk about it next week. See you there.